So this is a guitar body that I'm currently working on, and it's actually made out of mahogany, a strip of rosewood, some ash, and then the top is spalted maple. And if you're not familiar with spalted maple, it gives you this really interesting pattern. It's actually from the wood decaying and these discolorations, or the different the wood at different stages of decay. And my understanding is that the black lines are actually from the fungus that sort of marks its territory and sets up a perimeter so that other fungus can't cross that line. I may be totally wrong about that. Anyways, one of the things that happens with spalted maple is that you get a lot of this sort of thing. You get a lot of these soft spots like this here, or you get these more pronounced holes or cutaways. And so you have to deal with that some way. And a lot of people have asked me, how do I inlay this turquoise in these holes? So I intentionally bought this piece of wood with the notion that I wanted to do this. I wanted to try this inlay technique and see how it worked. And I think it's turned out pretty well. I'm hoping once I put gloss on it, it'll sort of even out the color of the wood a little bit, and then it'll really make these turquoise inlays pop. But anyways, this is just going to be a short video on how to do this inlay technique. It's really easy. So let's get started. So the first thing that you have to do is stabilize the top of the wood, or stabilize the spalted maple. Before you do that, a lot of sections will be soft, and on this piece of wood, some of the sections were soft enough where if I just barely pushed my fingernail against it, it would actually dent the wood. So I started off by using, there's a lot of different ways. I use this, well, there we go, denting it. I use this Minwax wood hardener. There's other options. I considered using a like epoxy or resin sort of formula. People will do that and put it all over the top. I didn't want to do that because resin will self-level, and this top, I don't know if you can tell, has some slight carving on it. It has some slight bevels on the edge, just to give it a little bit more interest. And I was afraid if I put the resin on, it would sort of take out some of that arch. Another option that I've heard that people will do is use just CA glue, really thin CA glue, and just cover the entire top with that. I don't know that that's that much different than this wood hardener that I used, but it's expensive. So a small bottle of CA glue is, 20 bucks for enough. Maybe less. Maybe I'm over saying that, but this Minwax was pretty inexpensive. The other issue is that I tried both. So I bought some wood, the wood hardener, and I bought the CA glue. And the issue with the CA glue is that it discolored the wood a lot more than the wood hardener. I think the wood hardener did change, it darkened the wood a little bit, but it was a consistent darkening across the entire piece of wood, whereas the CA glue was a little inconsistent, and I wasn't happy with that. So the wood hardener is cheap, it's quick, it's easy, and it does the job. And now this is a nice stable piece of wood that was ready for turquoise. So here's the scrap piece that I'll be using as an example. And I may not do all of this hole, but so really you have two different types here. You have this big hole, and then you have these, in this case of this piece of wood, I have these small punky areas. And it may look like I'm doing a lot here in terms of digging this out, but I'm really not. I'm really just kind of getting the loose wood out. I really want the wood to provide the cavities. I don't want to sort of sculpt it, but that's your prerogative. You can do that however you want. Here's another piece before I've done anything. You'll notice here, it just has a different texture to it. It's almost spongy, and I can just easily pull that loose wood out. It's almost like sawdust. I actually like to undercut it a little bit. not undercut it because I'm not really cutting, but like just scoop out all the loose stuff. And you'll want to do this before you stabilize the wood. I don't know if the wood stabilizer or if you decide to go with CA glue will stabilize these areas, but personally I think it just makes sense to go ahead and clean it out beforehand. So once you've done that, and by the way, I haven't hardened this wood, or I haven't stabilized it. So it's not going to be as pretty as it could be otherwise, but this is just an example. I then use these Inlay granules, and there's all kind of sources that you don't have to use Inlays. You can use really any substrate, but I have two different types. I have these really small, which is almost like a sand, and then larger nuggets for bigger holes. So you could really use anything you wanted. Sawdust, maybe from a different color wood. You could just fill it with resin if you really wanted to. But you know, in this case I'm using turquoise, and then I use a spoon and to put it in, and that's about it. So let's continue. Okay, so with the bigger holes, I really like to use these bigger granules to as much as I can. And if you wanted to, you could, if you had a really big hole, you could maybe even fill it with something else beforehand, and that way you're not using as much of your substrate. I actually got this at Woodcraft. Hashtag Woodcraft. Give me a discount, Woodcraft. You could use anything you wanted to. Oops. So just kind of get it in there, fill as much as you want. The reason why I like the big granules is that you actually get a little bit of texture. You'll see if you look up close, instead of just looking like a green blob, it'll actually look like you know, pieces of turquoise embedded into the wood. Just gives it a little bit more visual interest in my opinion. So, but anyways, usually with these bigger holes, I'm using these bigger granules, and then we're just going to sort of lock those in place. This is number 10 CA glue. You can really get this anywhere. I got this from Stu Mac. And we're just going to put some in there. And that'll hold those in place for now. And then we'll put in some of the smaller granules to fill it in. You kind of think about this if you're maybe filling a gap in some drywall or something along those lines. You just kind of want to get it in there and fill the void. I'll get a little bit more. And a little bit more CA glue. I'm being a little bit sloppy, admittedly, here. It's really important that you use the thin CA glue, and that way it will definitely permeate down into the gap. And I'm going to do something that I don't recommend that you do if you're doing this on a finished product, but just to speed it along, I'm going to use an accelerator. And the reason I say don't use it on a finished product is because sometimes the accelerator can actually change the color of the CA glue and make it a little bit cloudy. But for the sake of this video, we'll do that. And then of course, if you want to do it in these smaller holes like these that I filled, you can put it in those as well. If you use just the small granules like this, then it will it'll look more like one big piece of turquoise rather than having the sort of more interesting texture. And if you look closely, you'll see that there are definitely voids in this, let's see, in this area. And there's a couple ways to deal with this. One is to go ahead and put more turquoise in, or more of the substrate that you're interested in. Whereas another option would be to let it cure, and then go back, sand it back, and then put some more. So I'm gonna hit that again with some more accelerator. Kind of take a look at it, and it should be pretty dry at this point. So I think actually I will go ahead and put a little bit more turquoise down in that one small little gap, and then we'll go forward with that. If you've watched any of my channel before, you'll have noticed that I really don't like super glue. I don't like the smell of it, but more than anything, I hate getting it on my hands. But this is a bit worth it. And by the way, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It's real easy. Just do a quick click down below, subscribe, and that'll help me make more of these videos. I don't know if you can see, there's a little bit of the reaction right there between the accelerant and the CA glue, and that that's that discoloration I was talking about. So if you're doing this for real, I recommend that you don't do that. So we'll let it cure for a second. Even though I put that on, I'll let it cure, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so it should be cured. We're pretty close to it. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but definitely the area around is darker than the rest of the wood. Part of that is because the accelerant is still curing. I mean, still wet, so it was a little damp still. But the CA glue, a lot of it will change the color of the wood, so just keep that in mind. And I highly recommend that you experiment before you do this for real. So now I'm going to use a hand sander, or orbital sander, and this actually has some pretty aggressive sandpaper on it. And it's old sandpaper. This is, I don't know, 60 or 80 grit sandpaper, because I really, again, this is just for demo purposes, and I don't want to destroy any piece of sandpaper just for the purpose of this video. So I'm not going to talk through this because it's going to be loud, and I'll probably, maybe I'll put some music on, and also want to wear a dust mask. So here we go. And that's it. That's basically how you do it. Again, you'll notice that the wood is discolored around where the turquoise is. It's darker, and that really boils down to, I believe, the fact that I didn't treat the wood either with the Minwax wood hardener or an overall resin or sand CA glue treatment beforehand. I didn't stabilize the wood, and essentially what's happening is I think the CA glue, because this wood is so soft in parts, is wicking through the wood, and you're getting this darker area. So it's really important to make sure that you, at the very least, maybe put a vinyl sealer coat on the wood before you put in the turquoise or whatever inlay you want to do, so that when you put in your resin or your CA glue, that will seal off the void, and it won't be able to wick into other parts of the wood. The other thing that you'll notice, if I can get it up close, is that it's not perfect, right? There's voids in there. So it just depends on the look you're going for. Again, this is just an example, but if you were to do this, you could go back with more of the smaller bits and fill it in, or you could just leave it. The other thing is that I think once I polish this, if I were to, if this was the real thing, if I polished it up, it would look more brilliant. And obviously, when I put gloss on it, it'll look nice. In fact, let's try a little naphtha on it, see what happens. You can see it starts to jump out. This naphtha sort of will give you an idea of what it looks like. Now, one of the things you'll notice on the guitar that I showed you is that some of the pieces that I have extended into like the edge. So like the turquoise here is surrounded by wood, but what do you do when it gets to the edge? And that's simple. You just put a piece of masking tape, burnish it down to the wood, and then that masking tape ends up working sort of like a dam, and you can just kind of build it up in there. And then so you're sanding it here, and then you go back, take the tape off, and sand the edge flush. Then you get that really nice sort of 3D effects of this going through the wood rather than just sort of sitting down on it. But anyways, that's it. Please subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks a lot.